Alrighty. Oh, look at that. Oh, we got a business card here. We have a portrait. We have a painter here. What do you think? How about a portrait? Okay. You have an apple? I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. How awkward. Great to be with you all here today. I've been seeing a lot of farmers as I drive through the countryside. Any farmers here today? And any farmer over this hall will tell you that you don't plant a crop in the spring if you don't intend to harvest it in the fall, right? And that's what we're doing now. We planted 311,959 seeds. That's the number of memberships we sold, right? Unless we harvest it into votes in the fall. So how many of you have cast your ballots and voted? That's why we're here. When I think of getting out the vote, I think of the 2015 election when the Liberals were sweeping across the land. I was running for re-election in my seat in Ottawa, big government town, and I'm a small government conservative, and the Liberals were really trying to knock me off. It was 9:23. And the polls closed at 9:30. 7 minutes left. And I was banging on doors, begging my supporters to get out and vote. I asked this lady, have you voted? She said, no, I'm too old. I said, what do you mean? There's no law capping the age. She said, I can't drive. I said, I'll drive you. She said, well, my husband can't make it down the stairs. I said, I'll carry him. She said, I'm sorry, it's too hard. She closed the door. I walked to the middle of the street. The rain was coming down on my head. And I said to myself, there's 5-6 minutes left. If there's anybody I'm going to get up to vote, it's this lady. I'm going to go back. I went up to the door. I said, ma'am, soldiers died so that you could vote. She said, oh, all right. We got her out the door. She got her husband down. We got them into the car. But then I couldn't fold his walker to make it fit. So I fumbled around with that for a minute or two, and by the time I got it in, I realized that I could not fit in the car with them. So they tore off without me to the polls. A few minutes later, they came back. I said to my volunteer, did you make it in time? He said, we got there at 9:29, but they locked the doors early. So I kicked the door, I counted the door, they opened the door, and I said, these people have the right to vote. Sure enough, the kind lady let them in to cast their ballots. Happy story. So. The house, I took that lady by the hand. I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know how hard that was for you. And she said, and who are you again, sir? I have no idea if she voted for me, but she did vote. But listen, I think the reason that people are so fired up at joining our movement in record numbers is because they are ready to take back control of their lives. Don't you agree with that? Told them what to do. Whether it's excessive government controls during the pandemic, Justin Trudeau's use not of medical science, but of political science to punish people who made a different medical decision than that with which he approved of. Or whether it is the 40-year high in inflation. Unbelievable, 7.6%. Food price inflation, up 10%. House price inflation, 50%. Some of the worst house price inflation has happened right here in the East Coast as the higher prices in big central Canadian cities have then radiated out across the land and prevented the young people of East Coast communities from owning a home, something we used to take for granted. People feel like they've lost control of their money. The single mom who's putting water in her children's milk because she cannot afford to pay 10% more for groceries. The Timmins miner who told me he couldn't fill up his truck with gas, it was too expensive, to drive all the way over to Thunder Bay to see his dying parents one last time. The countless examples of 35-year-olds still living in their parents' basements because house prices are too high, and those people who did manage to get a house in the last couple of years now hit with the uppercut of quick rising interest rates after the government told them rates would not be going up anytime soon. You see, This inflation is predictable. I said it would happen 2 years ago when they began printing money. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits mean more dollars chasing fewer goods. And inflationary taxes make it more expensive for businesses to produce those goods. It's pretty simple. If you have an economy with 10 loaves of bread and $10, and then it's $1 a loaf. But if you double the number of dollars in the economy while keeping the same amount of bread, well, you don't get twice as rich. It's just the bread will cost twice as much. It's $2 for every loaf of bread. The more money they print, the more things cost. It's just inflation, isn't it? Just inflation, Justin Trudeau causing inflation. And so what do they want to do about it? Well, first of all, he wants to continue running these inflationary deficits. He's already doubled the national debt, adding more debt than all the previous Canadian prime ministers combined. Now he wants to add even more, and on top of it, he's singling out Nova Scotia for a big, fat tax hike, right? A carbon tax of 14 cents a liter that will take effect on, you guessed it, April Fool's Day. April 1st. You know, even though the Nova Scotia Conservative government has a real environmental plan that will reduce emissions vastly more than the federal government has even targeted, the Trudeau Liberals want to target Nova Scotians with even more taxes. How many of you can afford an extra 14 cents a liter on gas? Anybody? No. You're all tapped out. People here and people across the country can't afford it. Rural people have to heat their homes, sometimes with oil, and have to travel longer distances to get where they're going. They have no choice. They can't use a bicycle. They don't have electrified transit that can take them between their home and their work. They have to rely on a truck in order to safely get around on backcountry roads. Ladies and gentlemen, taxing these people will do nothing for our environment. It will only make Nova Scotians poorer. Furthermore, according to analysis by the Nova Scotia government, the carbon tax increase Trudeau plans for Nova Scotians will cost your household $2,000 by the year 2025 and $3,000 by the year 2030. Have you heard any local Liberal MPs in Nova Scotia standing up and fighting back? No, they've been as quiet as church mice. They're working for Justin Trudeau in Ottawa rather than working for Nova Scotians out here. Don't we need some members of Parliament for the Conservative Party who will fight for Nova Scotians and fight for So I'm here today to announce that the Poilievre government will reverse the carbon tax, will reduce the cost of gasoline, and will use technology rather than taxes to protect our environment. You know, it's not just the taxes, it's also the new red tape. Our farmers are now under attack by the Trudeau government. Not only has the carbon tax driven up their off-farm transport, their drying costs, and countless other indirect ways made our food more expensive and our farmers poorer, but now Trudeau's attacking their fertilizer. First with a fertilizer tariff that has driven up the cost of nitrogen and other essentials, and now with a mandate forcing them to cut their fertilizer use by 30%. Less fertilizer will mean less output for every acre farmed, which means they have to farm on more land and, ironically, burn more fuel to transport their combines and tractors over longer distances. All of this would mean higher prices for our poorest people, who would then have to cut back on nutrition and deprive their kids of essential vitamins and minerals. And more of our food output would be sent to faraway polluting countries, ironically burning even more fuel to transport that food by ship, truck, and train. How is any of this good for our environment? And by the way, didn't we learn during COVID how irresponsible it was to outsource the production of our essential goods and services. The rest of the world cannot be counted on to feed us. And we have no excuse not to feed ourselves. We have the 5th most farmland per capita in the world, and we have the best farmers on planet Earth. We should be self-sufficient, stand on our own 2 feet, feed our people, and be the breadbasket of the nation. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax, we're going to get rid of the fertilizer mandate, we're going to get off the backs and instead stand by the side of our farmers. We're not only going to do that with respect to their crops. We know that a lot of farmers like to hunt and they like to engage in the outdoors. And now they're under attack there too. Trudeau wants to spend $1 billion taking back the sporting and hunting rifles of law-abiding, licensed, trained and tested farmers and duck hunters. They're not the ones that are shooting up downtown Toronto, folks. The Toronto police say that most of the guns used in crime come smuggled over the border, 82% of them in fact. Furthermore, when the police do catch the bad guys, they're back out on the street with early bail in just a few weeks, shooting up even more neighborhoods. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't we spend that $1 billion bolstering our border to keep the smuggled guns out of criminals behind bars where they belong. Leave our farmers and our duck hunters alone. They're honest, law-abiding people. We should stand by their sides. We should also stand by the sides of our energy workers, shouldn't we? Here in this country. We are bringing 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every single day. Now, I saw some protesters who want carbon taxes and want to shut down our industry. Why aren't these protesters standing at St. John Harbor, protesting against the foreign Middle East tankers that are bringing oil from the other side of the ocean? Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh love oil as long as it's overseas oil. By shutting down production, blocking pipelines, and attacking our industry, they've just meant that the dictators of the world have grabbed up more market share, including right here in Canada. We have the 3rd biggest supply of oil on Earth. We have the ability to reduce the emissions of that oil production through carbon capture and storage by shifting our electrical grid over to nuclear and other ways to reduce the environmental impact, things that dictators in other countries would never consider doing. Why don't we unleash the production of our energy, use the proceeds to make our industry even greener and cleaner, and within 5 years, why don't we ban foreign overseas oil from Canada altogether? There's the 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas we have in Canada. That could be used to displace dirty coal-fired electricity in Asia, because BC is the closest point in North America to Asia. And then we could be using offshore Newfoundland natural gas to ship, to liquefy on the coast, and ship over to Europe to break European dependence on Putin. Why are we helping Putin fund his war against Ukraine instead of turning that money into paychecks for local welders and electricians and other working folks in our country? We have huge advantages. You know, you liquefy natural gas to get on a ship. Anybody know? You cool it down. What do we have in Canada? Cold weather. It's our most abundant natural resource. It got so cold in Ottawa last winter, Justin Trudeau was seen with his hands in his own pockets. Seriously, the engineers tell me you can cut the cost of liquefying natural gas by 25% by doing it in cold Canada versus doing it in the hot U.S. Gulf Coast. And using Quebec's and Newfoundland's and British Columbia's hydroelectricity, we can liquefy that gas without any emissions in the process. We are the clean energy superpower of the world. If we could just get the Trudeau Liberals out of the way, we could turn that power into paychecks. And we're going to stand on the side of our everyday working people by letting them keep more of their paychecks. In this country, it doesn't pay to work anymore. High taxes and high clawbacks mean that extra dollar that a single mom earning $55,000 a year turns into just 20 cents. She loses a clawback of her benefit for children's benefit, and the taxes she pays on her income, on her payroll, and on her gas to get to work. She loses 80 cents on the extra dollar. She earns 25 bucks an hour. She actually keeps only $5 after clawbacks and taxes. That's way below minimum wage. No one should be expected to work for an extra $5 an hour. That's why I'm going to assign a task force to come up with a plan to fix our clawbacks and our taxes so that our working people keep more and more of every extra dollar they earn. We should reward rather than punish work here in this country. For attending the World Economic Forum. We're going to get the gatekeepers out of the way of our free speech in this country as well. This new woke movement tries to silence anybody who disagrees. You know, they drove Jordan Peterson off campus over at University of Toronto. And now Trudeau's got this bill, C-11, that would allow the CRTC to control what you see and say on the internet. In other words, censorship. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 37 million regulators of internet content in Canada. They're called citizens. They need the freedom to decide what they think, what they say, what they see. So a poly of government will pass a Freedom of Speech Act, which will do two things. It'll end the censorship bill by repealing C-11, and two, it will require every university that gets federal grants for research commit to upholding Section 2B, the freedom of expression section of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so our students and our faculty can speak freely and debate freely in an open campus. Purpose here is smaller government for bigger citizens, reminding the state that it is servant and not master. I think Justin Trudeau forgets that he's not the boss. He thinks that the org chart has him at the top, the House of Commons underneath it, and the people underneath that. That's not how democracy works. In fact, it's an inverted pyramid. It's the people on top. There are members of Parliament underneath that, and the Prime Minister at the bottom. Has its root in the word servant. So a prime minister is a first servant, not a first master. This is not a dynasty. This is a democracy. This is not an aristocracy. It is a meritocracy, where you get ahead through your hard work. You know, I was adopted from a single mother who was 16 years old, who just lost her own mom. My two adoptive parents were school teachers who raised me in a middle-class suburb. But they always told me that it didn't matter where I came from. It mattered where I was going. It didn't matter who I knew, but what I could do. And that is what's so wonderful about Canada, that if you work hard, it doesn't matter if your last name is Smith or Singh or Mohammed. If you're prepared to get out of the bed in the morning and work hard and contribute to your country, you can fulfill your dreams on this land. That's why our ancestors came here. And that's why our ancestors... Freedom. You know, this is the difference between freedom and control. There's only 100% control. So if one person has more control, then someone else must have less. No wonder the country is so divided, because you have to fight over control. And now, Trudeau divides us by race, by gender, by ethnicity, and even vaccine status, right? Let's stop dividing people. Let's give people back their freedom to make their own decisions, because unlike control, you don't have to fight over freedom. You fight for freedom. If your neighbor has more freedom, you don't get less, you get more. If your Muslim neighbor has more religious freedom, you as a Christian or a Hindu or a Sikh will have more freedom. If your local small businessman has more economic freedom from red tape, you'll have more freedom to buy his products affordably, and your teenager might have the freedom to work for him as an employee. One person's freedom is another person's freedom. So instead of divide and conquer, why don't we unite for freedom in this country? Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, he said, I'm a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free to choose those who shall govern my country. It is this heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind. Thank you very much.
Right over there in the far corner where you see all the signs posted on the wall.